This is Under the Lens, featuring economic research by Gordon T. Long, editor and publisher of GordonTLong.com. The content of this presentation is strictly the opinion of Gordon T. Long and is based on facts he feels to be accurate as a result of his research at this time. All listeners are advised to independently verify all research for market changes. The following opinions are not in any way a solicitation for business, nor should they be considered investment advice. You should always consult a registered investment advisor before making investment decisions. Now, let's join Gordon for today's show.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, September the 23rd, 2015. I'm Gord Long at GordonTLong.com. As is normally the case, I have a lot of charts for us to go through this morning, so therefore I will pass over some of them quickly, but leave you to examine them further at your leisure. You'll need to open your viewer to full screen viewing, or you'll not be able to see some of the detail I will be discussing. A reminder before we begin, do not trade from any of these slides. They are for educational and discussion purposes only. The purpose of the audio is to discuss key developments in those areas not specifically updated in this month's Global Macro Tipping Points Research Report document. The research document this month updates regional economic developments. Therefore, the slides this morning will focus on our other three report areas of the GMTP report: the global risk and macro and U.S. economic developments. As I often do, I'd like to tie them together into a single discussion on what I see to be coming in the global automotive industry as what it can only be termed as an abyss. In this regard, I would like to discuss the following subject areas this morning. After a protracted period of subprime credit, false leasing residual values, and a strong U.S. dollar, we are left with a massive excess industrial supply. As you'll see when we discuss just the German example, the future is going to experience a serious bump in the road. In previous reports, I've laid out that the easy credit, quantitative easing, and ZIRP, zero interest rate policy, has brought demand forward. More importantly, excess credit is fostering a massive global oversupply. This oversupply is now becoming evident as industrial capacity doesn't need the commodities that it is so dependent on and has been scaling back orders. Commodity-based countries, primarily in the emerging markets, are feeling the pain. We are now at the bottom side of the echo boom chart from the globalization trap I've discussed many times before. We can see here we expect problems in the Central and European countries to be the next, as well as increasing problems at the state, city, and local level within the U.S. The resulting policy responses here will eventually lead to hyperinflation and that last leg up in the U.S. equity markets shown in our last month's MPOP discussion. A lot of problems are just below the surface and becoming very visible. None, as you will see, is more serious, in my opinion, than the coming global auto industry problem. Credit-based spending has been in full effect with auto loans and student debt since not long after the 2008 financial crisis. With so many credit-worthy Americans deep in debt, the temptation has been to go to subprime loans, which has accelerated dramatically. Subprime auto debt is running rampant. Student debt is now the most delinquent debt class in America. Subprime debt is once again supercharging the debt fuel market. Subprime debt is back in a big way. Over the last 7 years, courtesy of the Fed's low rate policies, auto and student debt has surged in dramatic fashion. While a shrinking middle class is unable to purchase homes with inflated values, many are still chasing the dream by going into debt for cars and college. The debt growth in these markets can be seen to be nothing short of simply fantastic. This is obviously the direct results, as I said, of low interest rates and resulting consumer spending. We've essentially allowed Americans to buy cars on borrowed money and go to college on big debt while making it tougher for them to purchase homes based on the last crisis. Like wars, we always fight the last war with weapons that are obsolete in facing the new war. What is scarier about this sudden growth is that much of the debt is being made to the people that are having a difficult time paying it back. Take a look at the subprime auto debt shown here. For auto loans, since 2010, the growth in lending has come from consumers with credit scores of 620 or less. Those with higher credit scores of 720 have seen modest growth. Those with lower scores have seen nearly a 100% increase in loans, while those with better scores have seen less than a 40% increase. In other words, the bulk of new cars are being bought with financing with those having troubles managing their current debt. With cars costing $30,000 and higher, but then who sees that? They just look at the monthly payment. This is no small price tag. Any tiny little hiccup in the economy, and this is enough to send their auto purchases into repossession. Do people remember the cash for clunkers and auto industry bailouts? These things did not happen too long ago. It appears that we are setting ourselves up perfectly for another kind of these scenarios. The result of prolonged artificially low rates is that markets are now fully addicted to this environment. The Fed is backed into a corner, and they really have little ammo left. Speculative lending is already dominating the market. You can see the subprime boom very clearly in any and all charts. The economy is clearly slowing down, however. Recession can and often happen. And once again, we have saddled a large enough group of Americans with debt where the pain will be deeply felt when this correction hits again. I showed this chart a couple of years ago and argued that the government and its regulators had little choice following the 2008 financial crisis but to force growth by any means in both the student loan area and in the auto industry. It has in actual fact succeeded. But at what cost? And what is the systemic risk associated with it? Both are dependent on the shadow banking system for their survival and growth. In the case of the auto industry for ABS, that stands for asset-backed securities, and the case of student loans for Sallie Mae and its financing through the shadow banking industry. It was MBSs, which stands for mortgage-backed securities, that was the central problem in 2008 crisis. It's about securitization of debt. The only thing that has changed is the vehicle and acronyms which justify them, and we have talked about this before and the differences in these acronyms. A huge difference between now and 2008, as I indicated earlier, is that the U.S. consumer is tapped out. The U.S. middle class is not making a living wage, and debt is now the only way for many to survive. Debt they have almost no ability to pay off. Credit has become a charade to postpone the inevitable, and it's no more evident than in the car and student loan area. Total household debt has continued to grow. Total household debt added since the great financial crisis has been primarily in student loans and auto loans. What has happened is that a strong U.S. dollar has allowed auto prices to stay lower than they might have been. It has also allowed credit to be there at extremely low rates and to make available to those who cannot afford the items, like autos, which they have been clamoring to buy. In the Northeast, it seems that everyone that I see is driving a new or relatively new car, SUV, or truck. It is rare to see a late model vehicle on the road anymore. There can be little doubt that this auto buying binge has helped an economy that can only be described as temporarily on life support. As I said earlier, global supply has ramped up and is expected to sell, currently forecasting 88.6 million new cars in 2015. This is a further increase of 2.4% year over year. However, the rate of increase is falling and sales appear to be topping. How many cars can the global economy actually absorb? World sales are trending the wrong way and actually look like a contraction is a real possibility in the not too distant future if we're not already there. Something has to give. With the currencies of emerging markets continuing to fall, it is now harder for many of these areas that were the global auto expansion areas for them to buy these autos. IHS Automotive says that emerging market sales are falling, and the only growth is in the developed economies where credit is still flowing. The predictions no longer make sense, which IHT is subtly alluding to, and these are the global experts that monitor this very, very closely. Charts like these always end badly, especially when they are based on cheap credit and historically low and artificial interest rates. It seems that every major G10 country in the world is a major exporter of autos. They include the US, Japan, China, Korea, Germany, Italy, France, UK, Canada, and the list goes on. Who doesn't export cars? Let's talk Germany for just a moment, and as an example to fully appreciate what this house of cards in the auto industry has become and what the result of easy credit means. It is no secret that with the rest of the U.S. economy, and especially housing sputtering, the one bright spot for U.S. production and manufacturing has been the automotive sector. Whether the recent strength has been a function of money losing leases, extremely generous terms on auto loans, including a new rise in subprime debt issuances, is for many up for debate. But whatever the reason, car makers have seen a few years of relative stability. But if in the U.S. automakers have been the solitary silver lining to an economy that is once again rolling over, as the Fed's lack of rate hike just confirmed, in Europe, car makers are absolutely critical, while for export powerhouse Germany, one can say the local auto industry is nothing short of systemic. Here are the latest facts on Germany's automotive industry. German automotive manufacturers produced 13 million vehicles in 2013, equivalent to more than 17% of total global production. 21 of the world's 100 top automotive suppliers are German companies. The automotive industry is the largest industrial sector in Germany. In 2014, the auto sector listed a turnover of 384 billion euros, around 20% of total German industry revenue. The auto industry is the largest industrial sector in Germany, contributing about 2.7% to gross domestic product. Some 20% of German exports are made up of vehicles and parts. And these numbers are not just unique to Germany. Germany is Europe's number one automotive market, accounting for over 30% of all passenger cars. That is 5.6 million, and almost 20% of all new car registrations, just over 3 million. Germany is home to 43 automobile assembly and engine production plants with a capacity of over 1/3 of total automotive production in Europe. And I can go on, going through statistic after statistic of the significance of what all this means if there was to be a slowdown, even partially, in any one of these auto exporting countries. In my recent financial interview with the Financial Survival Network, I discussed some of these issues with Carrie Lutz, who is a former credit attorney. And Carrie said, and I quote, "The car companies have done exactly the same thing as the mortgage market. They have back-end loaded leases. By overstating the value of what the car is really going to be worth at the end of the lease, they have effectively back-end loaded all these leases. This is the game car companies play to get rid of cars when the market is tight or when the economy is tight, to get people into cars they couldn't or wouldn't otherwise be able to afford. Now it is blowing up in their faces." End of quote. Let me show you some basic statistics here in the United States. Total auto sales in 2007 were $781 billion. This year they're going to be over $1 trillion. That's more than 30% higher. Why? How is the economy so much stronger? Leases, the percentage of all new vehicles financed accounted by leases, was nearly 32%, a record. In 2008 to 2011, 7 million cars were put on lease. In 2012 to 2015, 13 million vehicles were leased. 3-year-old used premium luxury cars are now down by nearly 7% from a year ago. Now, if let's say you didn't lease for those last few years or 3 years, now you were to have bought. And so if you look at the buying, the average loan term for new cars is now 67 months, a record. Average loan term for used car is now 62 months, a record. Loans with terms from 74 to 84 months made up 30% of all new vehicles financed, a record. Loans with terms from 74 to 84 months made up 16% of all used vehicles financed, a record. The average amount financed for a new vehicle was $28,711, a record. The average payment for new vehicles was $488, a record. See the problem? See the magnitude of what's going on here? 73% of subprime vehicle loans were bundled into securities, which now exceed 5 years. The result is we have a black hole between 3-year leases and long-term bought cars that isn't going to be filled. Prices are going to fall for used cars, and therefore lease residuals are exposed. As you would expect, early delinquencies on used cars have been steadily rising as credit has become easier and easier, and we're back to the ads every night that says 00040 financing. Have you noticed that tow trucks and companies now are all called towing and recovery? I go for an early morning run that involves a turnaround at a coffee shop, and I sit there often and watch truck after truck, which are recovery trucks coming through the drive-ins as they get a coffee from being at it all night. To me, it is a huge stealth industry that few are awake to see, but it's clearly evident to me every morning. Used vehicle prices are falling, and Edmonton's, as I mentioned, recently showed that used auto sales coming off lease are down 6 to 7%. Who is holding those losses? Those losses are within the shadow banking asset-backed security holders such as pension funds and others who have been forced to chase non-existing yield in desperation. What does this sort of ad tell us? It reminds me of the home mortgages, which became ATMs for holidays, vacations, and easy spending just before U.S. housing imploded. Don't you remember that? Everything, the house was considered your ATM? So what is happening in the shadow banking system exactly? Asset-backed securities sure aren't at the level they were previously, but they may be even actually a bigger bomb this time. The problem is, as I've said, prime borrower growth is falling off and must be made up for in subprime, or now what they call deep subprime areas, if you can imagine. And as usual, questionable loans are being made simply to be sold to the unsuspecting. Most of today's loans are financing new vehicles made by prime borrowers, although, as I pointed out earlier, it is losing share. Retail leases are near a record high, but prime loans are near a record low. Many owners, like the post-2008 financial crisis, are now upside down on the value of their cars and are locked in with the inability to change, or think of it this way, to buy another car. As our German examples showed, for every automotive job in the economy, there are so many other jobs. In fact, there are 7 other jobs dependent on a single auto job. A slowing auto industry is a major drag on any developed economy. Imagine the havoc a global slowdown could possibly cause, or a global recession. The global economy is slowing, and a U.S. recession is a real possibility. The central banks have few real bullets left to stop it. The auto industry may be the tsunami they never saw coming. In summary, let me remind you, as I do every month, don't worry because you know what the government will do. And never forget, throughout this turmoil, they will print the money. Until no one, of course, wants it or trusts it, but that day is still in the future. In closing, I'd like to take a moment as a reminder. Do not trade from any of these slides. They are for educational and discussion purposes only. As negative as these comments often are, there has seldom been a better time for investing. However, it requires a careful analysis and not following what has been traditionally been the true and tried approaches. Do your reading and make sure you have a knowledgeable and well-informed financial advisor. So until we talk again, may 2015 turn out to be an outstanding investment year for you and your family, and thank you for listening.
This has been Gordon T. Long, editor and publisher of GordonTLong.com. New recordings are posted regularly and can be found at GordonTLong.com. New show notifications are available through RSS feed, iTunes, and other social networking venues at GordonTLong.com.